Friday there. Why? What's the date today, Nori?
I don't know.
Uh, we're looking at Friday the 6th.
6.
6th
Is
of
it?
June.
Oh, I was going to guess it for the 4th, Gordon, but it's the 6th. My
The 6th.
goodness.
And of course, today there's one big topic that's in the news for everybody at the moment, and that was Labour's win in the recent by-election. Now, I know that you have a lot of things to say about this, Nori, so I'm going to let you kick off this particular topic because you have the most to say about it. I'm coming into it a little bit later than you.
Right. The first thing to say, Gordon, I stayed in Hamilton for about 10 years, and I know the area really, really well, how it moves and shakes and who puts in the work and what the issues are down there. There's a lot of unemployment. Ravenscraig was closed down. The mines have gone. And there's very little in terms of creative manufacturing industry. And therefore, there's a lot of people unemployed, a lot of people on low-waged jobs, and a lot of young people with no futures. And it's been like that for a long, long time. So when it comes to voting, a lot of them are disinterested because they see the last 10, 15 years maybe, what has voting done? It's done nothing for my personal my life. It's done nothing for me. So when you look at that scenario, it's not surprising that something like 54% didn't vote last night in this by-election.
Wow.
And what you get is people looking for something, getting drawn to things that might be different. And that's where reform come in. 7,086 votes, not very many, Gordon, but it's enough to make them third. And
Right.
third on 7,000 is a lot of votes in this contest, beating the Tories and the traditional Lib Dems and others.
Yeah.
Why the SNP failed? I think it's just the same old, same old. You've got the candidate was the wrong candidate, in my opinion. She went up against Michael Shanks twice. She failed. She couldn't overturn him. This is a guy that was a weak candidate. And this guy, Davy Russell, he avoided the hustings. He didn't even come to get interviewed.
Yeah.
And she couldn't overturn him. That tells you something about the candidate, and it tells you something about the SNP. They're not listening, Gordon. They're not listening to what the people want, and this proves it. And that's all we can say. How is this important?
Yeah.
How is this important? Because it's very important, Gordon, because we've got a massive, massive election next year. We're looking to get our independence, our freedom, our liberation on a vote that says independence, nothing less, on the next one. This does not build any momentum whatsoever. It was a big by-election for the independence movement, and now we're looking at picking up the crumbs from it.
Historically, I know that politicians view by-elections as not as important, and I think the thinking is that a by-election is fought largely on its local issues, and it doesn't reflect national issues such as the constitutional issue. So do you think that played a part here? Do you think people, I mean, I know I actually worked in that area as a volunteer after Ravenscraig closed down and there was mass unemployment in that area. I went and volunteered to teach young people who were jobless at the time without any hope new skills back in those days. That was back in the 1980s, and I can see that nothing has changed there at all. And you can't really blame people for switching off and not voting when they don't see any hope of change. And for Labour to win it with such a weak offering, I think just tells me that everybody has switched off. The apathy was the major winner here.
It could be, Gordon, but I remember when I first went down to Hamilton, Christina McKelvey was the effervescent SNP incumbent, and pretty much a very likeable person. But we had the council, which was SNP run, and I've got to say, it was run very, very well at council level. Latterly, the Tories and the Labour Party joined forces to take over the council. I think Hamilton went really downhill, and it made the fertile soil for reform to come in, because once you've got your roads back with potholes, once you get the grass that's not getting cut, once you cut accessibility to community centres, the council becomes a small council, and it doesn't do very much. Whereas when the SNP had it, it was a big council, incorporated quite a lot of things it was doing. And then you shut out the people from their communities because they're not involved. Perfect for reform to come in. Perfect.
Yeah. I was listening to a lot of the arguments about reform, and the media, as well as the main parties, are painting reform as the major threat to the political scene in Scotland. But
Yep.
I think looking at the result today, although you said they got 7,000 votes and they came third, how many votes did the SNP get by comparison, just out of curiosity?
Well, the SNP got 7,957, and the Labour Party got 8,559. So you're looking at something like 650 votes.
So you're looking at a three-party triumvirate there, right?
Yes.
Because it's an area of high unemployment, people are disaffected, there's no new industries coming in, and this is the kind of fertile ground that reform likes to campaign in, because you can then blame the unemployment figures on migrants or something else, something which probably is largely irrelevant to the situation. What's really needed is for central government to make sure the new businesses open up in the area and then people have jobs, which is what they really want. And yet that doesn't seem to have convinced anybody. I don't know if anybody was even saying that during the campaign, that they were going to bring jobs into the area. That's what people need. And it's
I can tell you one thing, sorry, Gordon, that wasn't said in that whole campaign. And I've seen literature and I've been down independence. It was never mentioned. And if you've got all those problems and the solution is independence, and you don't go anywhere near the solution, then you are as corrupt as the rest of them. It's time we all woke up to this, Gordon. What are this SNP doing? They're asleep at the wheel. They are not fit for purpose. How many weeks do I have to come on and say all this until we realise that what we're voting for is a pile of garbage? And the first thing to remember is that Parliament is a Westminster construct. They are under the constraints of the Westminster system, the Scotland Act. And I would have thought one of the best things they could have done, Gordon, was to come forward and say, we're going to repeal that Scotland Act in the Scottish Parliament. Why? Because the Silk Commission is gone. There's no dialogue between what happens here and they can take over. The Internal Market Act runs a coach and horses through the Scotland Act. So it's not what it once was. And now we're getting sucked into this libertarian model of economics and small government and dancing around the head of a pin because there's not enough backbone from the SNP to do something really positive about it.
Well, that's the curious thing, Nori. I mean, when you look at the major parties and never mind looking at independence, but just looking at the national picture across the whole UK, the Labour Party is basically promoting the policies of the Tories. The Tories don't know what they're promoting anymore because everybody else is doing their thing. The Reform Party is basically also using Tory policies, but pushing them even further right and even further towards a more fascist, authoritarian state. And the SNP is largely following the same model as Labour. It is going for this neoliberal free market economics model of everything and isn't presenting anything new. There's no new thinking. There's no new proposition that people can get behind to say, okay, maybe independence would be good because it will allow a new Scottish government to start bringing new businesses into the area, and they will have money to spend on local services because we'll have all of our taxation here to spend. That wasn't said. Why wasn't it said? Because obviously they're not interested in that. They don't see the by-election as anything important to them. The SNP sees next year as important, but this year, I don't think they care about it, Nori.
No, Gordon, the first thing we've got to recognise is that we've been hoodwinked about a Tory party and a Labour Party and a Liberal Democrat Party. They're all controlled by big market forces, big, huge corporations, big news organisations, big oil companies. These are controlling the Keir Starmers and the Rishi Sunaks and all these people. It's not about political parties. That's a red herring. If we can get over that mindset we've got that this is a political party thing, it's not. We're up against a big monster. And the
Yeah.
libertarian monster is one we cannot see. And it comes around us and does destructive things to us, but we still can't put a blame on it because they put Keir Starmer in front of us and we blame him. And we put Rishi Sunak and they put John Swinney and we blame them. It's a bigger problem than that, Gordon. And we have to come to realise it.
Well, whether we like it or not, it's woven into the fabric of society, and it has been probably for about the last 100 years or so, that all of the economic planning which is done, if any, and there's very little of it done, is based on the assumption that everything is going to remain the same all the time, and business like that because the whole model is based on making things as easy as possible for them
Yeah.
profits, right? Now, the problem is we've all bought into that. We're all victims of it. We're all living in it. We all have to work to make money to buy the stuff that these companies are producing, right? So we're basically slaves to it. But the actual doctrine of free market neoliberal global warming is like a religion. Nobody is allowed to question it. It is. It's there. It's what governs all our lives, and we just have to admit that's it. We can't do anything about it. We just have to live in this system, and we will be basically enslaved to it until we die. But the thing is, you don't actually need to do that. I've postulated many times the idea of a hybrid economy, and a hybrid economy is really simple. The first part of your taxation is set aside for the people. And whatever is left over is then used to invest in inviting and encouraging businesses to come to your country and to export your goods. There's no reason why we have to adopt the entire model when we could easily look after our own people first. And that's the problem. We're not doing that. And that's because people like Kate Forbes are worshipping at the altar of free market neoliberal economics, and they will not change. And they won't change because they can't. They're completely in awe to this. They're enthralled to it. As far as they're concerned, it's the truth. It's the only truth. There's nothing else that would work. And no amount of, conversations will convince them.
Yeah.
But somebody has to say it eventually.
Well, we're saying it from the rooftops, Gordon. We're saying it to free ports and special economic zones that public money goes into finances private initiatives. So that's public money that could go into schools and hospitals. It's going into big businesses' pockets. And they're saying, oh, we're bringing investment, we're bringing jobs. How many jobs? What kind of investment? I'll tell you right now, here in Drumnadrochit and the surrounding areas, up by Bewley and Dingwall, they're putting up windmills at a rate of knots. These battery farms are going up. They're building these new houses and they're gaslighting us, saying they're for the homeless people. They're £450,000, Gordon. That's a libertarian mindset. And always remember this. And I got it from a webpage, a YouTube channel, and the guy was speaking up, a libertarian, and he said, if you can't afford it, you don't deserve it. That's the mantra of these people in the 1%. You have to work really hard and you have to be very lucky, or you have to make money. You've got to be an Elon Musk or you're nothing. So here's the thing, Gordon. If you're a disabled person and the Tory party or the Labour Party, is, let's call them, but it's really a libertarian organisation, is saying to the members, like Keir Starmer, don't give them a winter fuel allowance because we get nothing back from that. What do we get from giving our money away to these people so they don't give it? Waspy women. Wait a minute, what do we get back from this? They're getting money from us. No, let's stop it. So and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And we're thinking, oh, this is terrible. Keir Starmer's just as bad as the Tories. It's not. It's the libertarian model they're working with. And we have to really wake up to this. Because if we don't, even the ground we walk on will be taken. The bizarre thing about this, Gordon, is I spoke to somebody when free ports were just getting established here in the Cromarty Firth. And this woman asked me if the graveyard will be all right, where her husband's buried. I says, no, it won't. If they find shale gas under there, they will start fracking. And that's what free ports, because there's a law unto themselves, will happen. Before we had a moratorium on this to stop shale drilling, fracking. GM crops, we stopped it in Scotland. That game's gone. It's a free market now, everyone for themselves, and they're all cherry picking Scotland. And who's the losers? You and me, and everybody else at the bottom. We're all losing, Gordon.
And of course, from what you're saying, Nori, and we know this is happening. It's not something that people would argue about. That it is happening. That these big corporations are moving in, erecting pylons, erecting wind turbines, building battery farms, and building vastly expensive homes, presumably for the very top executives who are working for the companies that are building all this stuff in the first place. That it's nothing to do with the local people. It is all to do with big business. But nobody once has ever said that there is another way of doing things, and this is the problem. We need somebody to say it, and we need politicians to start being a bit more heretical and saying, well, hang on a minute, this neoliberal model doesn't work because it pushes more and more people into poverty in order to enrich the 1%. And that cannot go on because eventually the system runs out of poor people to exploit. And the only way they can exploit them further is to try and put money in their pockets so that they can afford the stuff that's being made. And eventually that will fail. The whole system is based on running the planet down until it cannot take any more. It's completely polluted, it's run out of resources, and it's run out of poor people to exploit, and then it will fail. The problem is that in failing, it's going to take ages for this to actually happen, and it's going to be a long, slow death for most working people, not for the 1%. They're going to be sitting on their piles of money in the tax haven island somewhere, wondering why the sea's rising and thinking, well, I don't mind because I've got so much money I can afford a boat. But that is the way the globe is going at the moment, and nobody is saying it and nobody's challenging it. You need heretics, political heretics who say, yes, there is another way of doing this, a better way of doing it, a way of changing this system enough that we stop exploiting people to the extent that they become so poor that they basically just die, because that is the way this is going to go.
Well, I agree, Gordon, and we just need to look back at recent history. The Jews were always persecuted in Germany, and the ultimate was to kill the lot of them, get rid of them all, take them out, and look what happened. We're looking at Gaza right now. It's a genocide. It's take them all out, get rid of them, destroy them, children, women, pregnant women, the lot. It doesn't matter to a libertarian. Get them out. Do you think that couldn't happen to Scotland? Wake up, smell the coffee, because it's already happening to you. Because you, as a Scot, are seen as something that can be destroyed. You're not worth much. To the English, you're not worth much. To the libertarians, you're definitely not worth much. And so we can be railroaded down this road, Gordon, unless we come out of politics, the political party system, and we do things that are much more our own way, like going to the UN. And I was speaking to Ewan Kennedy, who's a prominent lawyer, retired lawyer now, and he says the UN could take a long time. Why don't we have another campaign going to the International Court of Justice? He says right now there is no British judge on that council. It is primed to go there and say this far and no more. You remember how we got our parliament, Gordon? It wasn't because the Labour Party gave us it. It's because we went to different organisations across the board and demanded that we had representation for the Scottish people. We have to do that again.
In answer to that, Nori, I think, and I seem to remember this correctly, that both Salvo and Liberation Scotland have already considered this idea of going to the ICJ. And as far as I know, and don't quote me on this, that's still on the table because the approach to the UN was one track. There is still the International Court of Justice, which can make a ruling as well on this, and that would bolster what is being done at the UN.
Yeah, what I'm saying though, Gordon, is they're concentrating a lot on going to the UN. UN saying do a twin-pronged attack. At the same time, you go there and you go there. So you've got two looking at it. We're missing a trick here. So we've got things we can do. Here's the thing, Gordon. If you're waiting for the SNP to join up with this, you're going to be waiting a hell of a long time because they're not going to join.
Nori, I have one thing I wanted to backtrack a little bit, back to the point we were talking about earlier, where you were talking about why should people be given the winter fuel allowance? You know, why should the WASPy women get their money? Why should benefits be raised? Now, the reason for that is it's not to give money to people so that they just hoard it like the 1% do. It's to give people money that they can spend in the internal economy. And that feeds back into the neoliberal model and generates profit. But they seem to fail to notice this, that in giving, not giving this money, but, you know, giving people the benefits they're entitled to, they have money to spend in the economy. And that bolsters the local economy. It creates jobs.
I know, Gordon, but the libertarian model itself doesn't believe in communities. It believes in a higher power. It believes up there. And it doesn't care if there's a circular economy down in Drumnadrochit or Partick or wherever we are. It doesn't care. It is ruthless. It is absolutely ruthless. They have no idea of fairness or equality. It is a horrible system.
But what I'm saying, Nori, is we elect politicians who do recognise that the internal economy is a part of the bigger economic picture. Then you can change that, because those politicians would vote to increase things like winter fuel allowance and to make sure that people get it, because they know that it's bolstering the internal economy and keeping jobs and keeping people in work. This is not something, it's not something that neoliberal multinationals will do, or the conventional politicians. It needs new people. And that's the whole point.
But if you get new people, Gordon, if you get new people and you've still got the same Scottish Parliament being controlled by Westminster, new people will just crumble in there as well. But you need to get out of there and start working your path to liberation through different means.
Well, we've got to be careful we don't confuse two things here. Once we've achieved liberation and that Parliament is no longer being run as the branch arm of Westminster, it then has the powers to make decisions like this. But it can't do it while it's basically on the coattails of the UK deciding what it does and what it doesn't do. And we've seen already that Keir Starmer is moving the country to a war footing. There isn't a war. There's no war on the horizon at all. But he's using the war in Ukraine as an excuse to increase defence spending and pour money into VAE systems, Lockheed Martin, building ammunition factories. And most of it, to be honest with you, has nothing to do with the UK's defence. It's the Ukraine and other countries in the Eastern Bloc to defend themselves and make money out of the war. And this is, again, another one of these neoliberal sort of tropes, that's how you make money out of war, you make money out of peace, but there's more money to be made out of war.
Of course there is. Of course there is.
Yeah, so you keep banging that snare drum and leading your country onto a war footing. There is no war. We're not threatened by Russia. Russia has no interest in us at the moment. They're having a hard time by themselves just now.
Yeah.
They started, so they're not interested in us. And that's just a red herring. Now, you mentioned earlier on, we were talking about going to the UN, and I think I mentioned to you before we came on air that Craig Murray put up an ex-post yesterday. Now, if you remember, Craig Murray is the former UK ambassador to Uzbekistan and a rampant Scottish nationalist. I think you could say he's definitely in the game for independence. And he's off to the UN in New York to oversee the delivery of further documentation in support of Scotland's claim to self-determination rights. Now that's interesting, because in that one man, although he's retired now, We have a lifetime's experience of overseas diplomacy. He's exactly the sort of guy you want giving advice to Salvo and Liberation Scotland about how to do this. And also, he'd be the very same kind of guy to talk to the International Court of Justice as well, for that matter. The key figure. And he has been, as you know, he's been targeted before by the United Kingdom's press and the UK trying to stir up trouble and trying to put him in jail. But he's in jail, he's retired, and he's still working for Scotland.
Again, Gordon, I don't know this guy. I've never met him. I've seen him on TV. I've seen him on YouTube. I have never met him. I've never been to a meeting where he's been. So I don't know much about the guy. I don't know how he got elected to be the spokesperson for us at the UN. I don't know. Was there other candidates that could have done it? Why couldn't Robert Black? Was Robert Black asked? I don't know. I would like to see the nuts and bolts laid out in front of us, the pathway to this, how it's all going to work out. And I haven't seen it, Gordon. I haven't seen it, and I'm hoping and praying that it's all going to work out.
A lot of this is being done under the radar for a reason, but Craig Murray's sort of involvement in this is largely voluntary. You know, he's not being elected or chosen in any way to do this. He's volunteered to help, and I think Salvo and Liberation Scotland were glad to have his assistance. And he's flying over there pretty much at his own expense, as far as I understand it, to help out. And that's just the nature of the way this is being done at the moment, because there is no money in it. You and I don't get paid for what we do.
You couldn't.
Nobody pays Craig, as far as I know, either.
The only thing, you and Kennedy, when I spoke to him, was really worried. He says, if this trip to the UN fails for whatever reason, and he reasons this on the premise that we haven't heard the counter argument against Sarah Salyers. There's going to be a counter argument. He says, why do you think the Westminster system haven't come out yet? Because they're not frightened yet. But once it starts going to the UN, and if they can infiltrate then the big guns will come out. And the counter argument will go back to 1707 when things were all done that, and they'll change the history, and they'll argue the change of history, and they'll get good lawyers.
Nori, it's very
careful, Gordon.
That the historical documents that are being presented at the UN were written by the British state. They're not in any way under any kind of argument. They were the ones who wrote the history. And the history states quite clearly that there was no formal union set up. England wasn't extinguished. There wasn't an act of parliament that brought in the United Kingdom of Great Britain. It doesn't exist. It wasn't legislated for. It has no legal underpinning. So it's just a fantasy, really.
But here's the thing, Gordon. Have you heard the counter arguments to that?
Oh, there's lots of counter arguments to everything, Nori, but basically the counter argument is, well, it is de facto the case because we have taken over Scotland. But basically it's an annexation. And that's
I know what it is, Gordon. I know what it is. But the thing is, do you think, and you're probably agreeing with, that the Westminster system and the governments and the big corporations with oil and gas here and all our whatever else we've got, are you saying they won't come up with some top banker lawyers to look at this again? And they might even be doing it right now as we speak, looking at the history and coming back with a counter argument. Now, all they need to do, Gordon, is muddy the waters. And so we're like, oh, wait, didn't think of that. We haven't countered anything yet. They've not come at us.
No, the whole point of the Salvo effort is that it clarifies the waters. The mud is gone. Sarah Salyer's research over 2 years has proved that, because the history that was written by England after the Union states quite clearly what happened after the Union Treaty was signed. And there was no Union formally adopted by Westminster. Nothing changed. It is simply England rebadged as Great Britain.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, adds Scotland to its own crown. Now that doesn't mean there is a union. It just means that England has taken control of Scotland and its resources, and that is the fact, and that's what they'll argue. But the plain fact of the matter is that there was no legal basis for it, and it never actually happened. And therefore, Scotland has got the right to self-determination. We don't have to let England decide how we vote or when we vote or
I
if
know,
we're allowed to vote.
I know,
So I
I know, I know
don't
all that.
get your Lord.
That is the argument. That is the mantra that's getting trotted out. All I'm saying is, do you think that without an SNP, without a political party, we will not. It will not be as easy a route to get liberation as you might think. He's froze, folks. I don't know what's happened to him. He's been tampering with his phone, and now we've lost him. We'll just give him a wee couple of minutes. But there is a counter argument to Sarah Salyers that is out there, and once it comes to us, we have to be able to deal with it. And if we can't deal with it, or if it muddies the waters, because as Gordon says, the waters are clear. Well, they're clear for the time being, but what if they're muddied again? How far back will that hold Scotland? Doesn't bear thinking about. We need a clear and transparent route to the UN and back again. If we don't have that, we're hoping and praying that people other than us can do something to get Scotland, but it's down to us. Gordon's still flapping away there, trying to get something going. It looks as if he's gone. He probably has to reverse his car and get some Wi-Fi. Come on, Gordon. Incidentally, travelling up to Fort William from the Drogheda on the bus, it struck me that one of the things that the SNP could be doing more to win by-elections like this is to think local. And that road, the B82, A82, whatever it is not fit for purpose. Two buses coming around a corner. I've got an inch between them. Cars, motorhomes are log jamming the corners. Nowhere to stop, hardly anywhere to stop. Nowhere for bikes or anyone that wants to have a nice walk around the loch side. Nothing like that. If that was all improved, the locals here would be thinking, yes, this is more like it. We